Well, hello, folks. Nice to see you. Uh, it's been raining a lot in Portugal. This has been the wettest March on record for a long, long time. I forgot exactly how long. The reservoirs in Algarve, that's south of Portugal, usually hot and dry, um, are full up, so they're going to have to open the floodgates on some of these reservoirs and let out some of the water to prevent, um, you know, the possibility of flooding. And there's flood warnings in a lot of river areas as well in Portugal. Um, Spain is slated for a very bad drought this year, despite getting some rain. Um, the further east you go, the drier it gets in the high altitude in the Iberian Peninsula. Anyway, all of this is, if you watch the news in America, the American ABC, CBS, whatever, you'll notice these weather reports, and it's amazing. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I can't remember how much weather whiplash there is. I can't remember anything like that in the past. So there's all this weather whiplash going on. You see it if you look. It's just unbelievable. People, I think, just think it's the new normal. Obviously, the leadership in the corporate world and political world don't care at all about it because they're all about growth. So just make more money as fast as possible. That's what the wars are about. That's what business is about in general. That's what politics is about in general. The revolving door, all that kind of thing. It's not just money in politics. It's structural. It's systemic. It was designed like this so that a small percentage of people could become wildly rich and powerful. It's just a fact. And you're lucky because you make money in the States and you're doing quite well right now, which is nice. It seems like a lot of the policies that they're cramming down Americans' throats these days is designed perhaps to create a fortress North America, absorb Mexico and Canada. There'll be like the border regions like Ukraine was for Russia, this buffer state that's not supposed to be in the EU or NATO, is supposed to be neutral so that, Russia feels safe. So we'll have Mexico and Canada and Greenland, so we'll feel safe, Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. And then we will control the Panama Canal. Nobody from the South, global South, gets past that because God knows when, over the next 10, 20 years, every single year, year on year, day by day, it's going to get worse and worse, the climate situation. Meaning people in the global South, in Africa, particularly India, parts of probably South and Central America, people are going to start starving to death. They're going to want to go somewhere where they can eat and survive. That's what human beings have been doing forever, for hundreds of thousands, millions of years, migrating around where they could survive. They're going to want to do that. And so we have to prepare to stem the flow of the migrants. That's part of what's going on today, I think. America's prepping. You don't realize it, but the people who are milking the growth engine, the wealth pump for everything they can get right now, buying up land and resources and just amassing huge amounts of money so they can buy things. I always wonder, do they really think their contracts are going to be worth spit when the world breaks down and civilization is crashing? I mean, really? But they do, they think so, because wealthy, powerful people are just as deluded and biased and stupid as anybody else on the planet. And they want to believe that they're smarter than everybody else because they got lucky. So, you look at all this stuff and you see it coming. They're going to want to create a safe haven for themselves, and they don't really care about you. They don't care if you live or die. I don't really believe they care, really. If they did, they would be busy pouring their resources into a different socioeconomic system, developing one that was more sustainable and more focused on living systems, complex, emergent, existing living systems, the integrity of our environment, ecosystems, and so on. And they would be partnering globally to solve these problems. They wouldn't be talking about war. I think most of the leadership in the United States are brain dead. They're sick people. They have a mental disorder, and it's ideological in nature, and it's a belief system. It has nothing to do with reality or science or data. It's highly emotional. It's very selfish, having to do with all of the positions all of these leaders in Europe and the United States can get in the private sector after they're out of office. They're selfish, myopic idiots. And we believe them because we love being conned. We like con men and con women, confidence people. We like gangsters. Our movies are all about it. It's weird on all these streaming channels now. So many stories about disaster, like Paradise, and corruption and greed. It's just all there. It's like a big horror story of how terrible human beings are, in sophisticated, exciting ways, with lots of people getting killed and conspiracies and all that kind of thing. And we love it. We eat it up. It's part of the zeitgeist now. It's part of the cultural milieu. This whole thing. So Indica just dropped a piece. I recommend reading his thing about why America is just like the Roman Empire. That was the last one. This one is called America Issues a Travel Warning Against America. So many years ago, for a long time, I've said to people, even going back to the 80s, enjoy your ability to travel now, because someday in the future, it's not going to be easy to travel like it has been. So we've taken this for granted for a long time. But borders are going to start shutting down. Authoritarian regimes are going to come into power to try to protect their wealth and power of the important people in their communities. And we're going to follow along because we're complete believers of the fear machine. Instead of searching for solutions and trying to understand what we have to do to create a better socioeconomic system, we just fall right into the fear trap. And they tell us all these stories, we get scared, we point our fingers to Chinese people or brown people or Muslims, we get phobic, Islamophobic, Russophobic, and we just think that if we can only kill our enemies or keep the brown people out or whatever, everything's going to be great for us. We don't understand these systems are global and more global than ever. So social media pollutes everything. Our technology pollutes everything. It's a machine that just keeps us jumping and dancing. Yeah, it's like people are, have 6 guns and they're shooting at our feet and we're just dancing around. It's really bizarre. And we take it, we bend over and take it, because everything we're consuming in the media is telling us that, we know what's wrong and we know what you should be concerned with. Don't think, don't ask questions. And I don't mean like asking questions on Rumble, delving into misinformation and conspiracy theories as opposed to, well, conspiracy stories. A conspiracy theory might have some evidence behind it, but all these stories of conspiracy and all this incredible misinformation, and we don't know how to think about it ourselves, and we don't know how to build a community of people who are more careful in their thinking, and how to discuss among ourselves what we need to do to push back against this machine, which is all, it's a growth machine, it's a wealth pump, and it's not about you. You're just a cog in the wheel for now, doing your slavery bit to keep the system going until you're not needed anymore. I think some wealthy people, actually, not all of them, because it's not a monoculture. It's just as diverse as any other community, but many wealthy and powerful people, I think they think they're above it all. And there's nothing they can do for you because they have to get more control, more money, more power. And so they need you now, but they might not need you tomorrow, and it doesn't really matter, right? I don't know why Trump and all the people behind Trump, the deep state, Trump's deep state, all these tech billionaires and so on, want to wreck everything so quickly. Well, I do, but it's complicated. I can't go into it now. Accelerationism and all of these TESCREAL belief systems. Somehow they think they have to wreck everything, destroy it, to make something new. Because to reform it would mean they'd have to share power, they'd have to be more democratic, they'd have to have faith in people, ordinary people like you and me, and they don't want to do that because they don't. They don't care about you. They're so cynical. It's just about the stock price. They don't care. Anyway, like I was talking about this inability to travel happening, and I've been talking about it forever. And I tell my friends all the time, if you want to establish yourself somewhere in the world, you better do it now, because there's going to come a time when you're not able to do that anymore for many reasons. And we live in a very fragile system at the moment because of the poly crisis. And so we can't really take anything for granted. It's not a stable system. But we do take everything for granted because for now, things are still working. I can get my electricity and my water, but doomist, whatever, degrowth, whatever, doomer, whatever, come on, pay attention. It's not that hard to get multiple sources of good information from scientists and engineers and experts across many domains, and it all adds up to this system of ours is self-defeating, self-destructive, self-terminating, sick, diseased, pathological, violent, ugly, destructive. It just is. For now, we have enough entertainment and we have enough food, so we're okay. We don't care what happens to anybody in the rest of the world because we're doing okay. And to empathize with it is kind of a waste of energy because you got to get up in the morning and do your work. Compassion, who cares? I mean, there's so many contradictions, so much hypocrisy and double standards. And it stems from groupthink and motivated reasoning and other things like that. But it's so bizarre that we can just spend so much money bombing poor people in the Middle East and not print any money to solve real problems that are real existential threats to us. So Indica reports on this, and he says, You know, he mentions he can't travel. He was in the States for a long time. Now he's back in Sri Lanka. He's a Sri Lankan American. Uh, so it's weird. This is all a warning, a travel warning that America has issued against itself. So he mentions white people. Recently, for example, they picked up Jasmine Mooney, a Canadian white lady and American Pie series actress in San Diego. She said, "We were up for 24 hours wrapped in chains." They also picked up Jessica Brosch, a German tattoo artist who CNN disgraced with the most unflattering missing person photograph in history. They put Jessica in solitary confinement, a form of torture, for 8 days across more than a month of not being deported, but rather tormented bureaucratically. They picked up Rebecca Burke, a British backpacker, at the Canadian border on her way out, and are still toying with her as we speak. And this isn't just people on visas. They're picking up legal residents as well. Fabian Schmidt, a German green card holder for 17 years, was, according to his mother, violently interrogated at Logan Airport for hours and being stripped naked, put in a cold shower by 2 officials, and being put back onto a chair, she said. He hardly got anything to drink, and then he wasn't feeling very well, and he collapsed. He was hospitalized. So the cannibalistic colony of America requires immigration, but it also requires subjugation and humiliation to make people easily exploitable. What's the difference about Trump in his affairs? He applies the cruelty to random people who thought themselves safe. He throws everybody in the same dank ice cells, sleeping on the same cold, bright floors, eating the same rank rations, exposed to the same gunda torture and bureaucratic torment. So, you know, and then non-white people don't get Indy started on this. I mean, it's just a horror story, what's happening. And we don't seem to care, do we? I mean, you know, it's just the way it is. Nothing we can do about it. So we go on Medium and Substack and wherever we get our info, like myself, and we read all about it. But we do nothing. What can we do? We don't have any power. We can't organize. We can't talk to each other. We can't fight back. We're impotent. We're weak, you know, and we're well entertained. And we're just fighting to survive, to keep the lights on. So, yeah, America's closed for business, and you have no business coming here at all. As I said, this is a travel warning against America, issued by America. Stay out, or you'll wish you could just get out. Will this happen to you? I don't know. It's a randomized trial imposed on random people. As Dirty Harry said, you've got to ask yourself one question. Do you feel lucky? Well, do you, punk? The corporate machine that runs America counts as all computers do from zero. Trump may say America first, but Israel, zero comes even before that. Israel first. So anyhow, so forget the Arab, Africa, Asian, and Latin American migrants who have long been forgotten. If America is abducting a former American Pie actress in chains, you know that Pie is fucked. So a lot of wealthy people are moving to Algarve, and the Portuguese government is trying to figure out how to do this in such a way that doesn't mean that local Portuguese people can't afford to buy a house. Because, you know, we live in a market system, so if the prices go up, that's just what the market says. And people be damned, right? They can't get affordable housing or even affordable rent. So while the wealthy people can go somewhere, Ecuador, Slovenia, wherever, even people are moving, Americans are moving to Russia. That's a thing. You know, if you have a buck or two, you can go somewhere if you want to, if that's your thing. But if not, you're stuck. And if you're wanting to go to the States to go to school or do anything or work, you know, get your work visa because they need your engineering skills right now. Later, you'll be fucked, maybe. And how long is this going to last after they've wrecked the United States? All these lunatics, reactionaries. I don't know. It's terrible. So moving on. Better Offline is an interesting podcast. But Ed Zitron is a critic of technology, basically. And mostly he's a critic of how they do their business, because now it's all about growth. It's not about the product. And it's not about the customers. And all of us are frustrated with all of the platforms that we use. Or if we're not, we're just so accustomed to them, we don't care anymore. We've lost our ability to question whether or not the product serves any purpose or gives us what we want or does what we thought it's supposed to do. And so he criticizes this idea that all these tech companies and leaders are just about pumping up the stock. They're just about growth. They don't care about the customer anymore. And that's a fact. And we don't care to criticize it either, because we can't even think about it. We're just in this treadmill, whether it's hedonic or misery, and we're just doing what we're accustomed to doing every day. You know, log on, check your Facebook wall, check your Google, go to the meeting app, whatever the heck your boss has, whatever suite of productivity software your boss has subscribed to or whatever. And we mindlessly go there even when we're being manipulated and used and monetized. And we've lost our ability to think about it anymore. Like, I'm older, so I can remember Google decades ago or whatever. And I can remember, Apple decades ago. Some people, this is what they grew up with. This is all they know. And so we've lost the ability to critically examine what's going on with these products. And it's sad. It's pitiful. So Better Offline is a really good podcast to understand a critique of tech from this perspective. And this is from a guy who loves technology, like we all do. We want it to work for us. We want to have a good experience using it. And we might not be able to use it for much longer, even with Mexico and Canada as buffers for American security, along with the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean. Look at the weather in the States. I mean, it's not immune any more than it was immune to a pandemic. We don't want to use this. We don't want to do that. We don't want to sacrifice anything. Over a million people get killed before, earlier than they should have died. They die earlier than they should have died. And we think, well, we're in the States. We can't be touched. And then, of course, we don't send vaccines to countries in Africa because there's no money there. It's so wrong, and we think we're immune. We're not immune, Maybe nobody's going to invade the United States. It's never been invaded. It's only been colonized, invaded by Europeans, colonized by Europeans with that beautiful genocide. But it probably won't be attacked until there's a strategic nuclear war. Then all bets are off. But I think more likely America will just balkanize and start devouring itself when things get tough. Because people in U.S. America have forgotten how to cooperate and understand how things work. They're not even curious. Or maybe some people are, but they're not working deliberately, coordinating with their communities to do something different because they don't know what different is. They have no concept of another way of doing things. So we're just kind of stuck in this culture, and we can't think our way out of it. We're not creative enough, imaginative enough, because we're not encouraged to be. We're just programmed to go along with the system we're in. So another thing I want you to look at is Citations Needed. It's a podcast I listen to, and they interview interesting people. For example, Jane Haller. She's a PhD in political science from the Graduate Center of the City of New York, and she's FAIR's senior analyst and managing editor at FAIR. Let me tell you what FAIR is, so you'll know. Okay, FAIR is a national media watch group, has been offering well-documented criticism of media, bias, and censorship since 1986. So she is managing editor there, and it's a good source for information about the media. On Z, she just wrote an article called Corporate Media Offer Excuses for Powerless Democrats. And it's a good article. I would recommend reading it. As oligarchs Donald Trump and Elon Musk continue their pursuit of power unfettered by the Constitution, many citizens wonder why their elected representatives in Washington are doing so little to stop the administrative coup. They also might well wonder why the media so rarely asks the same questions. So on this Citations Needed podcast, where they talk with her, with Julie, they're talking about this long tradition of, Meet the Press and State of the Union and Face the Nation. These shows have been around since the 40s, and they're still very important shows. It's a relic from a different era. These Sunday shows still loom large today. No, they don't have particularly high ratings, but much like the role editorial boards of major newspapers play, they matter to the people who matter. You don't matter, by the way, because you're not a player, you're not supporting the players, you're not maintaining the system and the structures of the system, so you're just nothing, really. If you watch these shows, it's not really about you, and the opinions will infect you and destroy your ability to confront reality and understand what's really going on. I pity people who get their information from news, TV news, cable news. I don't care where it's from. RT, Al Jazeera, Fox, CNN, I don't care. Because it's a form of information that's so propagandized and narrow. These sound bites don't teach you anything. The only way to know what's going on is to read books and read long-form articles from journalists who do the work. Journalism requires, which means they find facts, they find good sources, they digest the information, and they write about it in a way that helps you understand what's going on. These people who have integrity, who care, and are not just, bought and paid for by special interests, corporate interests or institutional interests or whatever. In other words, propagandists, PR people masquerading as journalists. We still have good journalists and good journalism, but we have to go out and we have to find it and know how to vet it ourselves and decide for ourselves whether it's good or not. So, since the 1940s, these weekly shows have featured panel interviews with government officials. You've seen them. Lawmakers, candidates, and other political figures, usually from the U.S., as part of their stated missions to tackle pressing issues, produce robust discourse on current events, and hold electeds and aspiring electeds accountable. It's nonsense. You got to listen to this podcast. They go through it really well. It's easy to listen to, and the guest is fantastic. So They shape the agenda and tell lawmakers, advisors, CEOs, and other people who wield power across our political, economic, and social systems what to care about that week and how to analyze the current moment. But it's not for you, you know? If you think you're learning something about anything important to you on those shows, you're not. But you are seeing, if you can analyze it properly, how they spin the propaganda on those shows and what they focus on and what they don't focus on. That's even more important. The questions that they're not asking is extremely important. That's why you need to read Julie and listen to this podcast so you'll understand that. Maybe it's not, you haven't clocked it yet, you haven't seen it, but once you see it, you can't not see it, you can't unsee it. It just becomes glaringly, noisily apparent when you watch these shows how ridiculous they are and how they don't serve your interests or the interests of life. But to what extent do they serve any real journalistic function? To what extent do they actually ask difficult and challenging questions? Do the Sunday morning shows truly illuminate our political moments and interrogate the powerful, or essentially do the opposite? And what effect do these shows, known for setting the agenda in Washington, have on policymakers, news media, and the public? It's a self-reinforcing feedback bubble, info bubble, right? They're just feeding into their thing. And their thing is the wealth pump, it's growth, it's, it's just about we, the world, everybody at the top has to make much more money, and we have to convince the plebs and proles that they have a chance. If they buy a lottery ticket, somebody's got to win. There's a chance. It could happen. It's like I've lost my patience with these climate people who are all about, we have no problem fixing this. Yes, we have to extract more minerals, but we can do it. And once we do, the system, the electrical grid and everything will be sorted out. We first need the political will coming from corporate leaders and political leaders to make a huge change in the way we do things. And that involves degrowth. That involves inventing a new socioeconomic system. You can't not think about that. And how much oil and gas is required to get all the materials out of the ground to build this new infrastructure? And are we going to invest those materials and that energy, oil and gas and diesel and so on, into this? Or are we going to spend it on jet flight fuel for F-16s and F-35s and bombers and so on for the wars these morons want to fight? They want to drag you in. How many French people and Belgian people and British people are lining up to get in the military ASAP so they'll be ready when they have to fight Russia? There's no evidence that Russia or China wants to invade your country. The security issues that Russia has are legitimate. I'm sorry, you hate, you fear, that's fine. It's the same thing with everywhere in the world. People have legitimate security issues, not just the United States, not just the rules-based order, not just the Anglosphere. Other people have concerns as well. Of course, people in the Middle East don't matter. You can kill 1 million kids there. It doesn't really matter because security. What the hell are you talking about? You've got this one country in the Middle East that matters and everything else can go to hell. It just makes me sick. So they talked to Julie Haller, and I would read her article, and then I would also listen to this podcast because she's a voice you need to hear, and she knows what she's talking about. Also, Citations Needed did a piece on Newsbrief, disappearing of Mahmoud, I guess, Khalil, and the phony campus safety panic. And I agree with everything these guys say in this podcast. So you know where I stand if you listen to this. I don't have to regurgitate it. Uh, they did fine work. Just go listen to them. But we're being lied to and programmed to be idiots. We're programmed to say, please fuck me. Please con me. Please lie to me. Keep the lies going. I want to believe. The most important thing in my life is believing the narrative. And if I can't, I'm going to have all this cognitive dissonance. And I'm going to feel like my identity is being assaulted. And I'm just going to fall apart. And I can't take it. I've got to belong. USA, USA. It was funny. I was watching the UFC, and there were two Americans fighting. And they were still chanting USA, USA. I mean, I understand. You've got a guy from Brazil and an American. USA, USA. It's not like you're watching to see a good fighter win a fight. It's got to be nationalism, But then when two USA fighters are fighting and they're chanting it, I mean, there's something really off about that in my book. So there's another article. This is Craig Murray, and he wrote a piece that was in several outlets called "Putin is no Hitler," and that was on March 14th. And he has a number of good points that he makes in this. For example, the opposition parties in Russia are at least allowed to contest elections, albeit on a heavily sloped playing field, whereas the Ukraine, they are banned outright. So there are all these contradictions. No government's perfect. Certainly the U.S. government isn't. Do you think it is? Are you happy? Are they delivering for you? Anyway, they can't even have an election in Ukraine now. The plain truth is that the Western powers interfere far more in other countries than Russia does. Through massive sponsorship of NGOs, I lived through the Hong Kong protests. I was living there at the time. Journalists and politicians, much of which is open and some of which is covert. They have legitimate concerns that go way back, in case you want to know, way before the Maidan thing. The U.S. uses terrorist groups all the time. You're my friend, now you're my enemy. Anyone who reads books about the recent history knows this. For those nations that destroyed Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya to argue that Russia's intervention in Syria shows Putin to be evil is dishonesty of the highest degree. You might not like Putin or Xi Jinping, but do you really like Trump? Or anybody in the States? You guys, half the country always hates the president. So what's your problem? Why are you so worried about Putin? I mean, he's just the leader of his particular country, and they're not on your doorstep. The commies aren't under your bed. The neo-Marxists aren't after your kids. The 1% of people who identify as LGBTQ plus A blah, 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 aren't chasing your people. The United States has had a quarter of Syria under military occupation for over a decade and has been stealing almost all of Syria's oil. So what do we get now? Terrorists are in charge. Yippee, because Israel can come in and take territory. So it's all good. The 51st state wins, and that's all that matters. If the terrorists are friendly to the 51st state, then they're our friends. If minority groups in Syria get murdered, who cares? I mean, really, who cares? We don't. The foreign policy of the EU is propelled by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Vice President Kaja Kallas, Estonia and Germany. The fanatical Russophobia these two are spreading and their undisguised desire to escalate the war in Ukraine cannot help but remind Russians that they come from nations which were fanatically Nazi. So, America, Saving Private Ryan, we won won the World War II. No talk about what the Soviets sacrificed fighting the Nazis. We don't care. We don't want to know. Please don't tell me about that. And you're not going to read a book about it because you don't want to know. It offends your sense of identity, but you don't do identity politics. You're not woke. You know what's what. The contradictions are insane, pernicious, grotesque. To Russians, this feels a lot like 1941, with Europe in the grip of a full-on anti-Russian propaganda. The background to Trump's attempt to broker a peace deal is troubled, and Russia is understandably wary. There's so many good books about Russian history and just the history of that region, and Russophobia and the Great Game and all this kind of stuff. And it really puts a great context to it. None of this is new. It just keeps happening in a different way because the system we live in needs war and conflict and chaos. The people in power thrive on it. I was listening to The Rest is History podcast, where they have a series on the French Revolution. You can read Carlyle, 19th century, his perspective on it. You can read a lot of books about the French Revolution and the Jacobins and all that kind of stuff. But it's fascinating. And you have to understand the revolution's coming anyway, one way or another, because these power systems always crash and burn eventually, taking a lot of innocent people with it. And these days, when powerful empires fall, they screw up the whole world in a myriad of ways that are difficult, almost impossible to keep track of, because we're talking ecocide, omnicide, we're talking about massacres and genocides, and all of this is just heating up the planet. It's an omnicidal heat engine. But the war is lucrative to certain people. It's not controversial that these companies that supply weapons to these proxy wars are earning money from it. You send an expensive tank with all these components and electronics to the battlefield. It gets blown up by a $3,000 drone, completely trashed, fried. And then the whole business ecosystem gets to build another freaking tank. So that business ecosystem makes shitloads of money. And the share prices go up, and everybody who owns shares is happy. And we go out and buy a new car. I never depended on Oprah Winfrey for her charity. I can buy my own new car. We're so proud. Wherever there is a war and money to be made from war, you will find the same ghouls gathering. Those involved in launching the invasion of Iraq should be excluded from public life. Instead, Powell is now the UK's national security advisor. It's a revolving door. They go from one thing to another, year after year, decade after decade, doing the same thing. We don't pay attention. We don't care. We just don't care. We love being lied to and conned. But Putin is not Hitler. I always say Putler, right? It is only through the blinkers of patriotism that Putin appears to be a worse person than the Western leaders behind massive invasion and death all around the globe, who now seek to extend war with Russia. And they just can't wait to go to war with China. China really isn't out to kill you, man. It built high-speed rail networks for its people, bringing people out of poverty, spending trillions of dollars on things like that. And the West spends trillions of dollars on war. And you're like, cool, I feel so much safer. I feel so secure. I mean, what the, right? Here in the UK, the Starmer government is seeking actively to prolong the war and is looking for a huge increase in spending on weapons, which always brings kickbacks and future company directorships and consultancies for politicians. So you get your job, after you're out of office with some company or some group, lobbying group or think tank that's all about this shit. And your kids get blown up in the war. And innocent people, children, get, you have these drones that are sniping children in the Middle East. And we just shrug our shoulders like, who cares? Can't say anything bad about the 51st state, or you're off to the gulag. We are not holier than thou. We do not have in the West moral high ground over anything. And you just look at history. Was Tamerlane, the Mongol warrior, any worse than our people? When they were running around conquering Delhi and whatever. Yeah, he was mean, but he was also involved in the Muslim Renaissance, the Islamic Renaissance that preserved Aristotle and Plato and science and everything back then in the Dark Ages. Labor Friends of Israel has published a picture of Starmer meeting with Israeli President Herzog 6 months after the International Court of Justice interim ruling quoted a statement by Herzog as evidence of genocidal intent. So Craig Murray is an author, broadcaster, and human rights activist. He was British ambassador to Uzbekistan from August 2002 to October 2004, and a rector of the University of Dundee from 2007 to 2010. The guy is not stupid. He's not a propagandist. He's not a lunatic. He's a person who sees through the bullshit. Why can't you? And if we can see through the bullshit, what are we going to do about it? I also made a quip in a post I put up about we're heading for a disaster that'll make the Irish famine look like a potato famine, which was a horror when it happened in 1846 or something to 8 or 52, I think it was. So many people died in such a horrific way. You can't imagine how terrible it is to starve to death. And when you look at children starving to death in Gaza, and they're holding back aid, because all children work for Hamas, right? It's a nightmare to think about the suffering that these children go through. Why don't we care? No empathy, no consideration, no compassion. And you're a Christian, are you? Huh? Yeah? White Christian nationalist? It's like, for them, yes. For us, yes. Compassion, love, heaven. For them, fuck them. Let them starve to death. Well, I'm telling you, right now we're headed for that, and you are not immune. You are not immune. These feedback loops in the environment are going to affect you. It's going to make your life a lot simpler, much quicker than you think. And you don't want to prepare for it mentally or psychologically. You don't want to do something to kick these ghouls out of office and build a new system that's more sustainable and gentler and kinder and more decent and protects life, because life begets life. Can't have life without living networks, without an ecosystem, with biology. You're a biological thing, and you're connected to this whole open system. And if you don't understand that, you're incredibly ignorant. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, you need to study some biology and thermodynamics and get up to speed, understand energy, and so on. And you need to realize how important living systems, complex, emergent living systems are to your well-being and to your children's well-being. People say, well, these billionaires have children too, right? And they don't want their children to have a hard time. I don't think they care. They think they're above it, and they think Their families are doing fine. So for now, in their life, everything's great. And why be concerned? Well, I'm telling you, these people, the 1% or however you want to characterize it, are not immune to any of this any more than they're immune to pandemics. There's no conspiracy like a Davos crowd wants to depop the world. The system is going to depop the world. We will lose billions of lives to starvation over the next 20 years or so. And it's not because of a conspiracy. It's because it's built into the system and the structures of the system. It's a deadly, deadly machine. And of course, right now we look around, we have everything. So we don't want to confront it. But the information's out there. And the thing, it's no good being a doomist or a doomer or a social critique or knowing what the problems are with the climate or any of this stuff. Information, education, all that's good, right? But if we're not going to do anything about it, who cares? I mean, we're not going to do anything about it because we got no power. There's nothing I can do about it. And then we get really, really excited about, going to war with China. And we're so excited at the new Monroe Doctrine and taking over Panama Canal and taking over Greenland and going to war with Mexico. They're talking about that because of the drugs. Who the fuck is doing the drugs? Americans. Who the fuck is selling the drugs to Americans? Americans. Nobody came up there and held a gun to your head and said, you got to do drugs, dude. It's because our society is sick that there's a huge demand for this crap. It's a health care issue. It's a public health issue, alcoholism and all these things, all these addictions. It's the Mexicans aren't making you addicted. Chinese people aren't doing that to you. You live in a sick society, so you're hooked. And you point the fingers with 4 fingers pointing back at you. And every accusation is a confession. And it just drives me nuts to see it over and over again. Never seems to end. Think about this stuff. Go out there, get good information. I post stuff at Facebook, Globe Hackers, and also Blue Sky, BulllyMT, and minds.com in case you wonder about these articles I'm looking at, and so on. I have a Substack and Cospelon and Medium under my name, Stephen Cleghorn. Doesn't matter. I'm not really writing anything that a dozen other people haven't written, and a lot of times I'm just curating. I'm saying, friends, look at this stuff, digest it, think about it. Stop getting upset for the wrong reasons. Woke doesn't matter. Culture wars doesn't matter. Don't listen to Eric Weinstein. He's a freaking idiot. These people are egomaniacs. They're just attention seekers. They're sick. Don't look at them. Get together with your friends and family and join organizations and groups that are doing something to push back, to change things, because things need to change, because this system is self-terminating, and that's a fact. So if you have a problem in your real life, go out there with real people in your community and try to fix it. We should not be voting for anybody in Congress right now. Or, we've got to find different types of leaders who have the right concerns. And if they don't, we shouldn't support them. Why do these people, Schumer and Chuck Schumer and all these people, get elected over and over again, and they never deliver? They're in the same conflict, the same cycle all the time, because it's lucrative for them. They're careerists. And politicians can go from the private sector to politics to consulting to think tanks, you know, seamlessly to corporations. You know, Dick Cheney, what was he before he got into politics? Nothing. You know, Halliburton came after. And these people are all like that. In Europe, they're all the same, and it's well documented. There are tons of articles and studies and papers and books about it. You know, the so-called revolving door. Why do we support them? We go after each other. We hate each other. Innocent, powerless people, we hate them. And we support these freaking vampires who are sucking the life out of Earth, basically. Remember, if we're going to make a transition, we have to invest our time and energy and imagination, creativity, our energy resources. What's left of, you know, we still have plenty of oil and gas. We need to invest it into creating a more sustainable energy system. And we have to think that maybe it's not important to have fast fashion anymore. And maybe we need to eat right and so on. These basic things that your grandmother told you maybe 100 years ago. Look, the past wasn't perfect. It's been rough forever. Life is rough. Human beings are mean, rough people, man. We do things to each other. Ooh, man. And we've always had warfare since the dawn of civilization, and probably way before then. But it doesn't have to be this way. Don't you think that we have the potential to be better? Really? You don't think so? I think we do. I think if you're talking about progressivism or progress, I think progress is wisdom, learning how to do things better so that we live healthier, happier lives and we can thrive and we don't have to kill each other and genocide each other and drop bombs on each other. We can live and let live. We can collaborate, and we can make a better world. And there are a lot of people, organizations, groups that are working on things like this that you can join and work with. Maybe we don't make it. I'm not very optimistic, but it's better to try, I think. So that's the thing that drives me all the time, you know. It's just having this feeling that we actually could do better. And, you know, hate has nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with it at all. Yeah. You want to be a Christian, a Buddhist, or whatever? Go back and read the canon, read the teachings, and put it in context, historical context. If there's some gems there in the Jefferson Bible, with all the magic taken out of it, what are they? Where do the ethics come from? Where does the moral arc come from? And how can we share that with people so that we're on the same page, so we can agree on certain things? Reality. What's real? How do things actually work? How do we prove that? How do we show that? What tools do we use to learn what's actually happening, how things actually work? And once we understand reality, can we all kind of agree on basic stuff? So we have a starting point to create and invent and innovate and all this fun stuff. And does it always have to be for the market, for money, for profit, or can it be for something else? For pride, for friendship, because we care about each other. And if you say no, then you're a cynic. You're the one who's a cynic, not me, not the social critic, but the people who think that human beings are just that way. You win or lose. Wolves or sheep, you know? I'm sick of it. Anyway, have a good week. It's Monday. Do your best. Take good care. Bliam T. Out.